going to have a wayfinding presentation by Planning Director Clint Spencer. Go for it, sir.
Well, thanks for having us here tonight. Just want to briefly touch base with the council on where we've been with our wayfinding design. So far, we're about 90% done through the plan now.
Final touches on it. They'll be back for the council for adoption in the next month or two. But we wanted to bring in our consultant, Glenn Swantak from Merge Design. He's here to just present a series of slides that will show the different types of signs that are being prepared, whether they're the wayfinding signs, the parking signs, district naming signs like our downtown district, or even one of the side projects was to come up with a new standard for our park signs as well. And so there's a lot of different parts that are involved with the wayfinding, and Glenn's going to kind of run through those tonight. He's at the back here. He'll be coming up to the podium. And Kim from the chamber is also here. She's on our steering committee. She's helping to co-chair that. And so we're just here to present as an FYI where we're at in the process.
Go ahead. Thanks, sir.
Thanks.
Can y'all hear me? Okay.
We're good.
It's not coming through. Yeah. Hello? Okay. I did this with the mask. I didn't want to get too close to it. Well, thanks for having me, council. And like Clint said, we are in sort of the final stages of the planning portion of this project, which includes locating where each sign would go all around the city. And that's what I'm doing tomorrow and Wednesday. We have a sort of a preliminary version of what we think, but we're actually going to go out to each location, site check and measure and verify that signs will fit in those locations, and just sort of the final look over to make sure that we have everything in its proper place. And Clint will be joining me doing that tomorrow and Wednesday, just going around and looking at each of the locations. So that's the technical part of where the signs go and what they say. What I'm going to show you tonight is really the fun stuff. It's what they're going to look like. And we've gone through this process now a year, almost over a year, where we've involved the community. We've had a steering committee, we had stakeholders, we did various design options, and this is where we landed. This is going to be the final design. This was the initial theme board that we came up with for this design, and it's about the brand. We have this wonderful brand logo and tagline, and with bright, vibrant colors that reflect the character of Hermiston. So we wanted to build upon this brand, and this was the chosen option that everybody seemed to gravitate towards. So I'm going to show you different types of signs, and they're in different sizes and different configurations based on where they will be located. So these are the gateway signs. These will be at all of the entry points into Hermiston. So whether that's a large gateway, more of a monument like out by the airport, or maybe where there's limited space, where you have to have a taller gateway, or even if it's just mounted on a pole because maybe it's within the DOT right of way where it needs to be breakaway. So we designed these as different sizes and locations. This is a 3D view of what it will look like. So we're bringing in the logo, but we're doing it in more of an architectural form with cutouts, a little bit more artistic, but we're keeping the tagline, we're like a suite. The stone on the bottom is the stone that's on Festival Street, so it carries through consistently, not only through the brand, but also through the architecture as well. And then you can see the other different variations of what it would look like in 3 dimensions. We started to do photo renderings. This is, I think it was snowing when I was here when I took a picture for raining. But you can see that, we're really creating, instead of just doing a green marker sign there, trying to really identify all of the entry points into the city, and just creating a memorable gateway so that when, somebody's driving by, it creates a great first impression that, somebody has arrived at a place that is important. And part of that is also, we really want to promote downtown, and getting people to downtown. We also have identified other districts as well, like the medical district and the industrial, what do we call that now? The industrial district? We haven't landed on a name, but it was...
We're calling it the South Hermiston Industrial District.
Yeah, South Hermiston Industrial District. But these are the downtown gateways, and again, keeping with the theme of the brand, but doing it in more of an artistic, sculptural way, where we have these, the watermelon shapes on the side that are cut out with the downtown in this area. Looking at the Festival Street plan that you had discussed, pulling Festival Street out right to where this building is here, we thought that this is a great opportunity and a great visible location to just have a downtown marker. And what this does is it makes downtown, it gives it importance and says that it is a place that you want to be. So we thought that was a great opportunity and a great place to do something there. We also were looking at other places. We don't know if this is a viable location. We're going to discuss that a little bit more tomorrow, but you can see that you want to identify the boundaries or the entry points into where the downtown is. It actually might be a little further down the way, but we're trying to still find out what those are. And those can change, as we go through the planning of where they'll be located. You can see how it's a cut metal piece there. That's probably a good we really want to extend downtown. We want to make it seem like it's not just the downtown core, but the businesses that are located more as you're approaching into downtown. We sort of looked at that boundary and giving that transition point at those points. We also are thinking of having something for Festival Street. And it would be more of sort of an arch way and just identifying it. Again, making it something that gives it a name and recognition. That a first-time visitor or a community, somebody from the community will say, "Oh, that's Festival Street." And then they say, "Go to Festival Street. That's where we're having the our market or our fair or whatever." But these are obviously big structures that costs can be associated with it. But we can also do things with banners as well. So strategically, I think what we're doing is trying to design a menu of signs that identify downtown. That can be done whether it's with banners, whether it's with a pole sign, whether it's one of those tall monument signs. I think that we're trying to give you the opportunity to say, yeah, we really want something out here that makes a statement, but maybe in another area, maybe it's just a secondary entrance. Maybe there's just a couple banners that say that you will run into downtown. Part of this package that we're giving to Clint, we're about 90% complete, is a full manual that will have every sign drawn out with all of the dimensions, colors, type styles, all the details that you can get competitive bids to fabricate any of these when you're ready to fabricate them as it's phased over the years. It's a little washed out. The green is a little bit here, but this is the bulk of the system, the wayfinding system, are the directional signs. We really want to create a consistent system that directs to all of your assets that are around the community. So, any public facilities, fair, community center, high school, library, and also the parks. And so we've identified what those are, and we've gone out and located them based on, the messaging. This is an example of the type of design drawing that you would get to get competitive pricing. So we do have all the views, section views through each of these that show how these brackets are put together. And it just sort of shows you the front and the back of these. And then 3D. So the back of the sign, it carries through that line identity from the logo. So it's a bracket that has function. It holds the bracket in place, or holds the sign panel, so it stops it from moving and deflecting, like in the wind. But it also creates an architectural element of the brand. And then we're just sort of looking at the photo renderings of what that could potentially look like in place. The idea is that these signs will be removed. And we're working with the DOT to, that's a little better. That's good. Thank you. To replace them with a consistent sign system. So currently you've just got, and I usually show this slide when I do the presentations, you've got, just a mismatch of all different types of signs and sizes. What we're really trying to do is make a consistent system so that wherever you see one of these signs, not only do you realize that you're still in Hermiston, but it just really shows that the community cares, that it has a coordinated wayfinding system. You always will know that that's where you're going to get information. So if you're traveling down the road, you see the green panel with the orange bracket, you'll know that that's where, it's a decision point, that that's something that is of importance that you want to direct people to. So, wayfinding is 50% getting people from point A to point B, but the other 50% is really marketing. It's really about the brand impression that you give somebody if they're a first-time visitor to your place. When we first started this program, we thought that this was really one of the most important parts of your downtown, was a parking system. Just, not only directing to parking or where it's located, but identifying what you're parking there for, and then also just letting people know, where they're parking. Currently, we just have open lots. As a first-time visitor, the first time I came here and I went to City Hall, I had no idea really where to park. I didn't know if I was going to get a ticket. I didn't know if I was going to get towed. And so I think creating a system like this just really helps somebody understand that they can park in this lot. It's called P3. If I have a flat tire, say where you're located, I'm in the parking lot P3, and then they can get help. So we're saying what they're parking there for, whether it's City Hall, downtown shopping and dining. We're always trying to promote downtown and shopping. So that's just a full-mounted version of the sign. But doing it in a consistent way with that parking key, so that when you see that and you're being directed to it, and then when you see the identification of the lot, then you know that that is an official, city lot that I can park at. It's not a private lot where I need to potentially tow it or I'm not allowed to park there. So we'll have these parking trailblazers that will direct to those lots. Some are maybe a little more obvious, but we do have off here Main Street parking lots that are behind the businesses that people would need to park to and get to. So we want to direct people to get to those areas. Also, thinking about, providing information from a pedestrian standpoint. So we have a couple of kiosk designs. The large one here, we were thinking could potentially be in your new chamber. It could be at the airport. It could be at the, the fairgrounds. Large facilities where maybe you could post information, and that could really be anything. We're just showing them with 2 maps right now. Promoting downtown and a citywide map, but that could be any kind of information that you'd want to display. The kiosk one is intended to be in the downtown. I think we've got 3 or 4 locations planned for those. one side can be a map, the other side can be interpretive information, it can tell, it could be a history panel, it can tell, it could be an event board that has upcoming events on it. That's something that we can design so that you can have the flexibility to post whatever you want to post in those kiosks. But it's a, you know, two-post system. It has the same cutout on the top, with the same, you know, stone bottom of Festival Street. You can see that how that sort of carries through the entire system. So just in a photo and potentially something like that could be located. You want to locate them in high pedestrian areas where, you know, a lot of people might potentially be gathering. But it's just really a good place to put information about the community and things and maybe even events that are going on. Or even just letting people know that there's, you know, things to do citywide, not just, you know, potentially downtown. We also have a pedestrian directional sign, smaller versions that could get mounted to existing poles if needed. We do have a pedestrian, I don't want to say it's a boundary, but it is sort of a boundary where you have to actually physically cross a highway, and then also maybe, you know, train tracks to get to some of your destinations. So you have to make sure that you know, people have that information as they're going along the way, to let them know that it is okay that you can use this as a pedestrian connection to make those connections. We're also doing trail signs to identify the trailheads. So even if you're driving along the roadway, if you see a trailhead off to the side that you might not have realized was a walking trail, that's another way to promote your amenities, which you have some great trails, especially out by the health district, out by the hospital. There's some units of downtown sign where you can get information. The final sign, I think the final one, in the menu are the park ID signs. So again, we really wanted to make this feel like it was a Hermiston park. Having the logo on there officially, you know, having the address, but making it still feel like it was part of the overall system as well. So that's part of what we're doing as well. We're giving you a design for those sign types to be implemented. Well, preview version of what that looks like. So that's really where we are. I didn't want to get into a lot of the detail, but just sort of give you an overview. This is the design. This is where we are. This is sort of what we're going towards, and hopefully we can get, you know, a lot of this implemented over the next few years. We got a little pause with the COVID, you know, but I think we're in a good spot right now to get you the design package and at least get some of this stuff moving forward. So, any questions or comments? We can take them.
I'm assuming the answer to this is already yes, but has there been any research as far as signs that are going to be posted along 395 as whether or not ODOT's going to be happy with that?
Well, yeah, part of what we're doing is coordinating with ODOT. We're putting together a package for ODOT that just shows exactly where each of their signs the signs that we're proposing will be located, and if they are to be replacing what they have out there currently. Our vehicular signs, they follow the MUTCD, which is their manual for traffic control, for breakaway and safety and reflectivity and font size and all of those things. So we're not too concerned about those aspects of it. I think what we do have to give them an official submission and work with them to make sure that they are okay with some of the proposals that we're making.
ODOT is also represented on our steering committee as well.
And that's what we're doing, I'm sorry, but that's what we're doing in the next, that's what we're going to be doing partially tomorrow, gathering some more notes and then compiling that document in the next, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks or so, that we will give them the final submission for approval. Yeah.
Well, first of all, the signs are beautiful, they look great, and I think that they're definitely going to spruce up town and directionally, and I think people are going to enjoy them. I did have 2 questions. One of them was regarding the sign on the entryway coming from EOTech from that side of town. I know that there is a Welcome to Hermiston sign. There's also a sign that was recently put there of trying to build an inclusive community. Is that sign going to be represented or included into one of these welcoming signs into the community?
I'm not sure what that is, but I mean, we can talk about that. Is it something that would be potentially added to the gateway, like a messaging, or would that, you think, maybe be a separate sign that maybe, I'm not quite sure what that is.
I guess I'm not a real big designer. I would say maybe a second sign would be a little bit more appropriate so the first one isn't so convoluted with a lot of different things. I see that sign, and honestly, it means a lot to me coming into town, and I would like to see it kind of incorporated into the other entryways into town, or if there's kind of a way to make that a message, because the message when you come into town is welcome to Hermiston, but I also want it to be that we are building an inclusive community. If we can get that somewhere into the signage coming into town, I think that'd be great.
I think that's something that we could work into the bases of the welcome signs. When I visit signs tomorrow with Glenn, I'll make sure that I point those out, and we'll see if there's a adjustment that we can make to help include those. Because you're right, we need to make sure that that's represented on our signage.
And I think that, yeah, we're open to those. We're trying to get as much feedback as possible, and then, like Clint said, we can see how we can incorporate that into the design.
That sign's been there for 14 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not new.
It's not new, and, but it's, and it was designed by NLC, if I remember right, as far as. Yes, sir.
We did just replace it, so I think that's what we're mind, because it got worn out.
So what is the price in all these new signs that we're going to do and we have money on making?
I don't know how I can answer that.
So what we did this time was to get the plan put together, so we could know, we could have a cohesive way to do it. And then we would look at implementing it over time. We don't have a big chunk of money to do it all at once, but we do intend to start looking at it over time.
Thank you.
I can also answer, we did give budgets, preliminary budgeting numbers to Clint, and we sort of have an idea of how much these things will cost. And when you look at it by the sign types, and then also understand maybe what your priorities might be. I think, like parking in the downtown, that could be an important part of this wayfinding. That can be implemented on its own level. As long as you implement things, you don't do 10 signs here and 10 signs there. It almost has to be done as a layer of the sign type. So you've got your parking signs, you've got vehicular directional, you've got pedestrian signs, and then the gateways. So if you view them like that, then in your mind you can start to think, we have gateways out there now, but we could replace them maybe a couple of years from now or a year from now or whatever. It's really up to you how you want to do it, because you'll have the book and the manual with all of the specifications, and you can sort of pick and choose how you want to have that implemented.
Any other questions?
I do have a follow-up. I have a follow-up regarding main or landmarker or destination signage. Like, for instance, like the side of the downtown sign. And I realize not everything is going to be able, not everything is going to be able to be translated into Spanish. but I would like to see on main landmarkers, like if it's downtown, at least maybe one sign that might be in Spanish. And it doesn't have to be with all the small markers, like the parking sign, like directional signs, but like a place of arrival. I think it would be great to have something in Spanish. Even downtown in Spanish, it would be El Centro. And I think that's a lot of terms that people are familiar with. And just to go along with what you were saying in your presentation, wayfinding signs is 50% finding where you want to go, 50% marketing to your community. And I think that'd be a great addition. If it's not like on downtown signage like this, but the kiosks that you mentioned, like maybe one map on one side and the other map on the other side, maybe one side in Spanish and the other side in English. Something along those lines. I would just like to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we can look at that as well. And I really, yeah, I mean, that is a part of the community that we need to look for places to incorporate that, and you're absolutely right about that. The vehicular directional signs, like ODOT, they don't let you do multilingual no matter what. But in opportunities like this, or in the key, like you said, the kiosks, that's dead on. That's like where you would bring in those details. Even the sculptural element along the side, we're using the watermelon because of agriculture. That can be, we can make that something too, if we wanted to make that unique. So there's things that we can do to bring those elements in. That's good.
Most definitely, and that's kind of why I didn't suggest, all these other signage. I know we probably need to be strategic with it, and there's only probably a limited amount of signs that'd be a possibility of you being able to do. I didn't want to make it too complicated, but at the same time, I think that's something that's very feasible.
Anyone else?
I have a question, Counselor. Normally I don't ask questions, but to follow up on what Counselor Barone was talking about, excuse me, I was sitting here thinking of the current pandemic and the lack of, in a lot of restaurants, the lack of menus and the use of QR codes. So, Oxbow Trail, for example, and I know the signage, you're going to want them up high enough so that they're not vandalized, but a person could zoom in on the QR code to let them know maybe where they're at on the trail, or to incorporate bilingual messages or something like that. Have you guys done anything with small QR codes on the signage?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we use QR codes a lot, and we used to hear, oh, QR codes are outdated, they're outdated. And now we're seeing them used more because of COVID. It's funny how things sort of, their use is getting used more. So, but it is a good way to get information to people using their phones, right? And that's a great way to do that, is just with a QR code. So, I think what it is, you guys tell me how you want me to do it. We can come up with the tools to get that information, to the user. But I think that's a good idea as well, for even multilingual, or even just giving people information about the trails, or even safety information, pandemic information or something like that. So just think of the kiosks as a blank slate, really. I mean, you can put anything in there that you think is appropriate or important. We're giving you sort of the design and the framework of what that could be.
With the maps downtown, is that going to help? Is that going to be where someone can get off and get the electronic and check it? Or does the person actually have to go out there and put it in the post? How's that going to be?
Yeah. It depends on, so even if it's an electronic sign, somebody needs to change it, right? They need to update it. So whether it's that way, or they send it to the printer and it gets changed and they print it. The upfront cost of putting an electronic sign is obviously more money, but then the long-term maintenance cost would be less. So there's pros and cons to doing both. And it really depends on where it's placed and the visibility of it, and if it would get damaged or vandalized, or if it's, perfectly weather resistant. There's a lot of things that go into determining that. But we have done interactive, they're not interactive, they're basically a TV monitor that's for exterior use. That can be updated remotely. It can actually be done, from an office, and it can, put the information up there remotely. And that's usually done with, for, promoting events, things like that. So, like the chamber could, if there's an event coming up or whatever, they could then put a poster in there in the electronic kiosk. Maybe you do one in a highly prominent area, and then the rest can also maybe be, more static information. And that's sort of when we look at the budgets and when we look at the opportunities of where maybe those could go. Those designs tend to retrofit the kiosks for both. It can be either way. We've even done it where one side is electronic and the other side is static, where it can be an updatable map. But yeah, and it's a possibility. I don't think we ruled that out, but it does come down to budget and maintenance and that kind of thing.
I want to say too, I like that idea about QR codes, because we can put those on several different languages, not just Spanish, but we can use the phone. And we're going to build out to Korean and Japanese here now, and so it's very nice to represent some other languages.
Clint, do you have anything to add?
Not at this time, no. I would point out, just from an FYI standpoint, that we did budget in the urban renewal budget for this year for doing the parking signage. So as far as, once this plan hits the ground, we can start immediately putting those out for bid. But probably what we'll wind up doing is doing their installation as part of the construction of maybe the city hall parking lot, so that we don't install them and then immediately have to tear them out.
That's a good idea.
So,
I'd like to see the sign with the welcome sign again. Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The welcome sign, right? There we go.
Do the number one that catches the eye. One to my left. I think we have one by the outer court, and it catches the eye. And I think that we will, yeah.
I like that.
Thank you.
There you go.
Kim, do you have anything to add?
Nope, I'm just here to support it.
Glenn, I think I might have one question just to put you on the spot with these welcome signs. Are you aware, are there rules stating you have to have your population? Because that's one thing, if we start removing those welcome to Hermiston signs and replacing them with these gateways, we immediately lose that population.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's no rule, it's not a rule. But ODOT does control that. So that is something we'll have to discuss with them and make sure that you're seeing it here, population.
Yeah.
If we had to add that to a design, we could add it to it or talk to them about that. That's sort of that's one of the things where sometimes the DOT will say, no, that's not something that we would it's up to you if you want to have that there, that kind of thing. But and some say, no, we want to have that. So it's and it also depends on the right of way too, where the sign is located. If it's within the city right of way, you can do whatever you want. It's not a rule at all that the population has to be posted. And how many times do you guys go and change that sign anyway?
Pretty frequently. Every year. Yeah.
Every year?
We're growing. It's kind of a point of community pride to up it every year.
I mean, and it's totally up to you. I mean, these gateway signs are not something that is, you know, we're designing it so that it's for you. If we want to add population, that's easy enough for us to add to these signs. It's, you know. But then if you say you want to add the Rotary Club and then the Kiwanis Club and all that, but you guys, actually, I have to give you guys credit. We do projects all around the country, and there's all, you know, the gateway signs, like, you go to some communities and they have all of their shields for all their clubs on the gateway sign, and it just, a lot of times, is clutter. It's clutter. You guys did what we always recommend people to do, is do a community board that is in the middle of your town. Instead of having it at every entry point, you just have this dedicated spot that's well designed and done right. And that was something that I pointed out to Clint when I first came out. I was like, that's something we would have recommended for this project if you would have had that. So you guys kind of already understand that, you know, but we can definitely add things on here as long as we don't clutter it up too much. No? Any other questions?
We'll adjourn. 7 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
squeeze it out of it.
I'm getting warmer. Keep getting closer and closer to this gross.
Oh, I don't listen to complaints on that side of the room.
You don't listen to complaints?
I listen, but I don't do anything about them. How about that?
Okay, that I can.
Okay, call the meeting to order. The mayor has been excused tonight, but I declare a quorum. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council, make sure you turn on your microphone, please. Okay, this time, we have citizen input on agenda items.
The speaker.
All right.
Turn on. Yeah.
Oh, my God. Got it? Try again. Citizen input on non-agenda items. Anyone wishing to bring anything before the council that is not on the agenda, ask to please do the following. Limit discussion on more than 5 minutes. State your name and address and direct your comments to the chair.
Good evening. I am Kimberly Rill, 305 Northeast 9th in Oregon, is my address. I'm from the Hermiston Chamber of Commerce. Just wanted to give a brief update and a thank you to the city. On October 6th, we had our candidate forum here at the community center, and the city so kindly donated the use of your facility for that event. So in a time of COVID-19, there are not many opportunities in town to have a socially distanced event that's open to the public. So this was a perfect use for that, and we wanted to thank the city for your cooperation in not charging us for the use of that. We were able to provide that service to the citizens of Hermiston. So thank you to city staff and to the council for donating that. I also wanted to make you aware, on Veterans Day, we're doing a car parade in downtown. I've worked with the city, a couple different departments on making this happen. We normally have a breakfast right here in the community center as well, where we serve a free breakfast to all of our veterans that want to come and participate. We do a program, have some dancers from Dancing Limited, those kinds of things. In the world of 2020, that's not possible either. And so we're able to change things up a little bit. We're doing a car parade, shutting down downtown. So we're gonna have flags every 10 feet on both sides of Main Street, people actually holding them from 5th Street through Festival Street, as long as we can get enough volunteers. Each veteran that's participating will be in their own vehicle, and they also receive a $20 gift certificate to a restaurant of their choice. And from the city, they're getting a movie gift certificate that was purchased through a program that Mark had done through CARES and those kind of things. So anyway, so the city is giving each veteran a token of appreciation. We are at the chamber as well, and we just wanted to encourage everybody, if you are a veteran or know a veteran, let them know about that event. And if you aren't and care to join us as a volunteer, we would appreciate that. We are meeting downtown at 9 o'clock on November 11th. If you're interested or want additional information, just contact the chamber. We'd like people to let us know ahead of time if you plan on volunteering, just so we know if we're going to have enough people, arrange for enough flags, those kinds of things. So I just wanted to say thank you and encourage you to participate in whatever way you see fit on Veterans Day for that event.
Thank you, Kimberly. Looking forward to that. And that's a fantastic program that you got going on. This is the year of alternatives, I think. All right. Anyone else? Okay, we're moving on to the consent agenda. Any items that anyone wants to either remove or discuss? none? So, roll call. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Harris and seconded by Councilor Furman. Any discussion? Roll call.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, motion passed. 7-0. I do get to vote, okay? I'm not the mayor, so I do get to vote. We got that the first time. Add it on. Okay, moving right along. Okay, we're at the public hearing. We have an annexation 4N 2802 BC, DL 1900 315 East Theater Lane. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest for the council?
No.
Seeing none? Okay, we're going to hear from on the hearing guidelines will now be presented by city staff. And that's you.
Yes.
Spencer.
The City Council is holding a hearing to consider a request for annexation to the City of Hermiston. The Council will consider the request and make a decision based on the criteria established in 15005 of the Hermiston Code of Ordinances. The applicant wishes to annex approximately 0.50 acres of land located at 315 East Theater Lane. The applicant is Humberto and Melba Medelas. The applicable substantive criteria relied upon by the city in rendering the decision to annex the property is contained in 15005 of the Hermiston Code of Ordinances. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the criteria described above or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulations which the person believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue by the close of the record at or following the hearing, in person or by letter, precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to LUBA based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony regarding the application. City Council shall grant such a request by continuing the public hearing pursuant to ORS 197-763-6B, or leaving the record open for additional written evidence, arguments, or testimony pursuant to ORS 197-763-6C. For this hearing, the process begins with the staff report, followed by testimony from the applicants and any other supporters of the application. This will be followed by opponents to the application. Finally, a rebuttal by the applicant will be allowed. The public hearing portion of the procedure will then be closed, and the City Council will consider the information and testimony received, adopt findings of fact, and render a decision on annexation.
This time, open the hearing. City staff will present the report.
As mentioned in the hearing guidelines, tonight the City Council is holding a hearing to consider annexation of a 0.50 acre tract located at 315 East Theater Lane. This is owned by Humberto Medelas. The property itself lies within the urban portion of the urban growth boundary and is adjacent to the city limits on the west and south sides. Basically, East Theater Lane is already in the city limits, and the apartments to the east are also in the city limits now. The applicant wishes to annex the property to allow connection to city services. The property is within the urban portion of our urban growth boundary and has a medium density residential designation, which corresponds to the city's R3 zoning designation, which is our multifamily residential zone. The property is surrounded by single-family residential uses and an apartment complex, and then there are also some commercial uses to the west as you get closer to Highway 395 along Theater Lane. East Theater Lane adjacent to this site is a city street now and is improved with paving only. As a condition of approval for annexation, the Planning Commission recommends that the applicant be required to sign a street improvement agreement for East Theater Lane. to participate in future installation of curb, gutter, and sidewalk adjacent to the property frontage in the event that a local improvement district or other improvements are installed. The Planning Commission held a public hearing earlier this month at their regular meeting in October, at which time no testimony in opposition or support was received, and made a recommendation that the property be annexed to the city with the R3 zoning designation and with the condition that the street improvement agreement be required for East Theater Lane. So the Planning Commission has made a positive recommendation, and at this time I'll entertain any questions.
Questions? Okay, at this time we'll take public testimony. Anyone wishing to speak or ask to come to the microphone, state the name and address, name and address, and limit the testimony to 5 minutes. And first, are there any proponents who wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any neutral parties who wish to speak? Are there any opponents who wish to speak? Seeing none, hearing is now closed. Okay, city staff will now present the findings of fact.
On page 41 and 42 of your staff report are the findings of fact in support of annexation. They detail the compliance with the approval criteria in 15005 of our Code of Ordinances, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on them. Otherwise, I'd recommend adoption of the findings of fact. And I can also say that Mr. Medelas did contact us and said that due to the harvest, he was probably not going to be able to make it to tonight's meeting.
Any further council questions? Seeing none, need a motion to approve the findings of fact.
Second.
Council Primers moved it, and McCarthy seconded. All right. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passed, 7-0. All right, moving on to ordinances and resolutions. We have the ordinance number 2112, annexing forehand 28 to BC tax lot 1900, 5/10 of an acre, 215 East Cedar Lane. Okay, I'm going to request that first time reading by the ordinance, of the ordinance to be read by title only and calls for a roll call.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, on 2312.
Yes.
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 Okay, request that the ordinance be put on for final.
First reading of ordinance number 2312 by only reading the title. As follows: an ordinance declaring land abutting East Theater Lane to be annexed to the city, describing said property, withdrawing said property from special districts, and designating zoning. Mr. Council President.
Okay, request that the ordinance be put on for final adoption at this meeting, and that the second reading be by title only and calls for a roll call.
Yes.
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 You traded just yours. You traded this for your prize.
The second reading of ordinance number 2312 by only reading the title. As follows: an ordinance declaring land abutting East Theater Lane to be annexed to the city, describing said property, withdrawing said property from special districts, and designating zoning. Mr. Council President.
Need a motion that the ordinance number 2311 be adopted. Become
2312.
2312, okay. And that's 12. Okay. Be adopted and become effective immediately after the adoption by the city council.
Second.
Okay, Councilor Davis moved and Councilman Carter.
There's no emergency clause. I didn't say there was an emergency.
Did not say that there was emergency clause.
Effective 30 days
30 days.
after adoption.
Okay. So anyone present that would wish to comment at this point? Hearing none. Roll call?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. We're on to fiscal year 2021, first quarter investment report. Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Harden. You have before you our first quarter. I'm going to take this down a little bit to this button. It's cutting off the blood flow to my brain. We have gone to a quarterly investment report per our guidelines, that's the minimum. The market's been kind of roiled over the last 6 months because of COVID. So I thought now would be an appropriate time to talk about, thank you, Lily, to talk about what you're looking at. The first thing I'd like to cover is at the top, you will see the heading of all the categories and columns. You'll see to the left the rating of the agency or corporate bond or whatever it is that we have in the portfolio, AA2, AA, A-. You'll see the trade date when we bought it, the settlement date when we owned it, the par value of the issue. There's what's called a CUSIP number. That's almost like an investment social security number. It's only valid for that issue. Once that issue matures, that number won't be used again. It's a specific identifier in the market. The security is actually, you got to know acronyms. RBC is Royal Bank of Canada. U.S. Bank, obviously, these are corporates. The coupon rate is what is paid on the investment. We have a practice of holding to maturity any of our investments. We do not speculate in the market. So when we see a coupon rate of 2.15%, that's what we expect to earn on that investment, unless it's called. And that does happen, and you'll see a record of that on the second sheet of the report. We've had a number of our instruments called in the past 12 months. Then there's the maturity date and whether or not it's callable. So that tells you what you're looking at here. Now, some of these have a fixed rate, some of them, if you go down to where we look at Toronto Dominion, you will see F2F, 3.2% fixed until April 27th of 20. After that, it will float. It'll be tied to an index in the market, maybe Prime plus 50 points, maybe LIBOR plus 50 points. I don't know the index right off the bat, but it then floats just like it would on a mortgage if you have a floating rate mortgage that resets every year. What I've tried to show here is the items that are, and it washes out. I said orange because they're orange on my sheet, but they're light tan here. These are bonds that we have purchased in the first quarter of this fiscal year. You can see we've been very active because we had a whole lot of things called prior to the purchase of these investments. We have two that should be in purple, but they show up white up there, Royal Bank of Canada. One of them matured today, $100,000. The other matures Friday for $25,000. We will reinvest those probably in corporate financials because that's a very good market right now. In total, and that's at the bottom, we also have corporate energy bonds and corporate consumer discretionary staple, which is Apple and Walmart and Shell International. At the time we bought them, they were very good investments. I am fearful that at some point they will be called simply because of the high rates relative to the market now. In total, we have $2.3 million and some change in total corporate bonds. Here we have our callable and bullet agencies, or U.S. Treasuries. These are what I call full faith and credit instruments. They're backed by the full faith and credit of the government. Should any of these investments go bad, we have a whole lot more to worry about than losing money on these investments. That means our government has collapsed. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But in there, we have different instruments that we're allowed to invest in. We have $2.1 million right now in that particular category. And we purchased only one instrument here in the first quarter of 2021, the Federal Farm Credit Bank instrument. Makes the sense that we're an agri-community, we buy a Federal Farm Credit Bank. Finally, the council in its wisdom decided to allow us to invest in municipal bonds in June. And we took the opportunity to load up on some really, what I think are good investments in support of municipalities and entities around us. I would point to the next to last item there for $25,000, Umatilla County, Oregon, School District number 8. We bought $25,000 of the high school bonds, and we're going to hold those suckers to maturity. It was, in my mind, a good buy. You see the coupon is 3.02%, and you look at the Washington State partner revenue of 1.2. We're making a good return on the investment. Finally, I always have to be mindful of the parameters of the investment portfolio that we operate under. Our total portfolio, when we include LGIP, and for those who don't know that acronym, that's Local Government Investment Pool, run by the Oregon State Treasury. When we combine the two classes of investments, we have a total pool of approximately $8.4 million. Now, we're also required to hold a certain amount of our portfolio very liquid. In this case, the funds we have in the full faith and credit bonds that I talked about, as well as the LGIP investment, add those two together, we have almost 65% of our portfolio we can turn into cash within a couple of days, if we had to. I won't say you wouldn't take a loss on it, but it can, whatever our needs might be in an emergency, if we got hit by a tornado, an earthquake, and we had to pay bills, we could conceivably have the cash within 2 days. Now, the investment metrics say, according to our policy, I can't invest more than the amount of percentages allowed for by the investment policy. I can invest 35% of the funds in corporates, agencies and treasuries, and LGIP, there is no limit. Municipal bonds, I can only invest 10%. There's a further requirement that if I invest 35% in corporates, no more than 5% of that number can be in one entity, and municipalities, no more than 25% of that 10% of dollars can be in one entity. So the diversification is required. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. At that point, I show you the percentages where we are. In corporates, we have some room to move, about 7% more if we want to. In agencies and LGIP, it doesn't matter. In municipals, I got a little bit more to move to. The idea here is I will move towards higher producing investments, but not violate the boundaries under which we have to operate. I would also point out the second page of the investment report shows you all the securities that have been called in the last 12 months. The active market the market's this active because when things go bad and go south, the first thing people do is call their high-cost funds and reissue at a much lower rate. I would give you an example. If you look there at the latest one we bought in the first quarter, it's 0.64%, but the coupon rate, versus 1.67 right above it with a Federal Home Loan Bank, a 1.625 Farmer Mac. And that's a really good rate right now, 0.64% on those agencies. So you can see where the market is versus what's been called in the prior year. With that, I'd be glad to stand any questions.
Any questions from the council? Great report, appreciate it.
I only bring all of this up because you're only going to see this 4 times a year, so I try to be sure you know what you're looking at next time.
I'd like your report. Well done, I can read it well. Thank you.
Well, I try to make sure people understand you don't have to be, an MBA finance guy to look at information and understand what it says. I try to make sure that can be done. Thank you.
And this does that well.
Oh, I should mention one more thing, I'm sorry. We talked about LGIP. We got word on October 21st, we're going from 1% to 0.75%. I think there'll be another rate movement down before December, probably to 0.5%. They have been artificially high in their rate relative to the market, and they are diverse enough that they're still making money, but they're going to be probably hedging their bets, and I think there will be another rate movement down before the end of the year, from 0.75 to 0.5. They tend to move in quarter increments, much like the Federal Reserve.
Councilor Brown?
I just really have one question. But first of all, congratulations on the LGIP and being able to read it. I think when you barely gave us word about that, it was at 2.6%, around there. And it just goes to show how much COVID and how things are going on in the economy and things are working themselves out. I did have a question about, you mentioned certain bonds or investments are callable. I guess I just want a little bit of education behind that. If there is more of these that are called, what effect does that have? And I guess how would you address investment going forward?
Well, you can look on the chart on the corporate holdings. You'll see a maturity date out there. That would be like a mortgage. You're going to pay it off by a certain date. You can pay it off early, but if you make the interest payments, you pay it off on that date. Many bonds and investment instruments are issued with a callable date. And what I do when we look at alternatives is I look at what's the maturity and when is the first callable date. The first callable date, we'll pick an example. If you look at Wells Fargo in the middle, that's a bad example because they have the call date only a month before maturity. That's not a good one to look at. If we look at Wells Fargo right there above JP Morgan highlighted, you can see the maturity is January 17th, 2024, but they have a call feature that says we can call it July 17th, 2021. What I'm looking at is I can hold that instrument at really in my mind, a paltry 1% until January 17th, 2024, okay? But they want to reserve the right, if rates go lower, to call it before that date. So I'm only going to plan on that 1% until 2024. After that, it's up to them what happens to it. But that's the only date they can call it. Does that make sense? Because what they're going to do is what we did when we did our refinance of our water bonds with the state. We had a heavy rate to pay and we refinanced lower. That's what these are to people that issue them. It's their debt. They're looking to lower their cost. Can't fault them for that. But I'm investing in them. I want to hold on to a good rate as long as I can. So I will look to that first call date and say, I know I'm good till then. After that, I'm going to be careful.
Thank you for that. I was going to say, and this is hats off to the mayor. I feel like he has a good expertise behind these finances. Even though we're not all, like I said, MBA majors or masters, it's really, there are a lot of numbers, and maybe to the general public, this is just a lot of numbers going back and forth. So part of it is education for me, to be honest. I really wanted to know. And the other part is to people that are watching. But I did have one more question then about callable. How many how many callable dates are there, or is it just one date? Where it's
There will, well, the way you can work with a callable date is to do a float to fixed rate. You can issue it fixed for a certain amount of time, and then periodically we'll let it float to some index that will reset every 6 months or every year. When you have a callable date, you generally do not have any type of floating rate. You'll have a fixed rate for a period of time, say 2 years, and then I will say it's callable every 12 months for the life of the investment. And the investor then has to make that decision. Is that acceptable that I live with that level of risk? If it's held constant for 2 years, then it's callable every year thereafter. It becomes a matter of, do my tea leaves look better than the guy sitting next to me who may not buy it? Because I know a number of economists and people that try to match the market. Certainly economists, I know 2 personally that predicted 7 of the last 4 recessions. So my guess is as good as anybody else's.
Mr. Kate, I have a question regarding the callable date in your bullet agencies, U.S. Treasuries. Ref Corp, 1/0/1900.
Great question. That's what's called a bullet maturity. Okay. In effect, we bought in that one, Ref Corp 57,000 at something less than par. All the interest payments have been stripped away from it. We probably, I think, if I remember right, we bought that at something around 51,000. So we bought it at 51. There is no intervening interest payments. On maturity, I'll get 57. It's called a bullet maturity, one time, and I have no interest streams associated with it. They're also called strips because the interest payments have been stripped off from it.
Very interesting.
It's more of a comment, not really a question, but honestly, this just kind of goes to show like why certain positions, and especially what you're doing, Mr. K, it's extremely important, and it requires a lot of expertise, a lot of know-how, and very grateful to have something like this, and for the citizens to know that we are trying to make as much as we can and squeeze every penny that we can and make the best of the investments here for our town and our city. So hats off to you for doing this. This looks really hard.
Well, I would love to take all the credit, but council in its wisdom allowed us to hire a financial advisor, a gentleman by the name of Don Lee over in the Portland area. He is an independent advisor. His firm is Lone Pine Advisory Services. I would not be able to have these choices without his ability to check the market pretty much every day and bring opportunities to the city. His fee is relatively paltry compared to the size of our portfolio, but believe me when I say, if I had to do what he does to manage this portfolio, the part that he has, I would take up a third of my day, probably 3 days a week, to stay in touch with the markets. I don't have that kind of time. He's well-versed. He's a 30-year veteran in this type of investing. He's doing a good job for us.
Appreciate that news. Any comments, any people that wish to comment? Kind of deep, isn't it? All right, we are down to, I need a motion to accept the quarterly investment report as presented.
So moved.
Councilor Kramer moved it, and Councilor Malone seconded. All right. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passed 7-0. All right, moving on to September 2020 financial report.
Thank you, Councilor Harden. Financial report for September. Talking about the Urban Renewal District. Our process of projecting revenue is based on historical collections activity averaged out over the last 3 years. it would seem businesses are holding on to their funds until their taxes are absolutely done. Nobody's paying early. That's my guess. We don't have revenue as we normally would at this point in time in the collection cycle. I can only imagine that there are businesses that are holding on to every dollar they have and going to pay it when it's due. They're probably going to pass up on any discount like we get on our property taxes because they're trying to keep their businesses open. I don't know if that's the case, but that's all I can figure, because normally by this time, as you can see, we'd have somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 already paid in September, especially when we have the economy we have in this part of the city. So I'm hopeful that when November and December hits, that's when we'll get the lion's share of our revenue for the year. So please bear in mind, what happened in the past is not necessarily an indicator of what's going to happen in the future. This is a good example of that. I'm hopeful that property taxes across the board for the city are not impacted by COVID. Second thing I would point you to is actual revenue in the general fund was $289,000. For the first quarter, we totaled $2.3 billion versus a projected total for that period, again based on historical percentages of $2.635 billion, a variance of $334,000. I do want to correct the verbiage at the bottom of that chart. It says 12,408 projected. It should be 12,408,000, because if I had projected revenue of only $12,408, I would expect to be written out of town on a rate. In any event, our revenues are down $334,000 first quarter of this fiscal year, June, July, August, and September. And quite frankly, I think we're lucky it's only down that much. Had we had any type of reliance on tourism or the restaurant and hotel, I mean, there's any one of a number of municipalities that would kill to have only a 12% drop in their revenue. So we're very lucky relative to a number of our fellow cities around the state and the country. On the expenditure side, expenses for September were almost $1.3 million, $14,000 below projected. We had moved some money into reserves in September that we probably should have postponed for a month or two until we had property taxes. I will fall on my sword and say I missed the boat on that. We could have held back maybe $100,000 to $150,000 in transfers. Stressing still to all the departments, don't spend money you don't have to. Only on mission critical issues, limit the discretionary spending. Right now, our savings to date is almost $700,000 or 17.1% below projected. In times of fiscal distress, I'm going to always point to our department heads and the folks who manage their budgets that they're doing a yeoman's job of identifying what monies can we hold on to and not spend. If it's mission critical, certainly we have to do it. But to the extent that you can say it's discretionary and not spend it and have an impact on your ability to service the public, they're doing a great job. And the way I'd like to recognize that, and this, again, it washes out when it's up there, there are a number of general fund departments that are doing a good job. I would recognize that I always want to give credit to those department managers. If you look at police operations, $185,000 to date that they've not spent. Obviously the pool, having only been open for a short time this year, there's a lot of money that's been saved there, $222,000. Court is way below. Even administration and finance is a little below because we did not have expenses of any great nature incurred by the council. And we've been saving money in the admin side of the city as well. So I feel like we're doing as good a job as we can. I want to recognize those departments that are paying attention.
You didn't recognize the city council.
I'm sorry?
I said you did not recognize the city council.
Well, you didn't go anywhere.
There's a reason for that.
So yes, there was nothing to go to, so
There you go.
you weren't going to spend the money.
No.
This is the slide I'm not happy to bring to you, but I have to because it's my job. We're below the minimum reserve of $1.867 million by $253,000. Now, I can make excuses, which I won't, but I will provide an explanation. I feel strongly in my heart that this month we would have been well above the minimum reserve without the effects of COVID. Even with the effects of COVID, had we not had to expend money for expenditures related to COVID and wait for the state to reimburse us, we'd have been okay. I make a footnote here that a total of $333,000 was spent in September on economic development assistance under the CARES Act. That's where we made economic development grants, if you will, to select businesses in town to keep them open because it's a benefit to the city and the economy to do that. We also have other expenditures here in this building with the lighting, the sound system, that CARES Act will reimburse us for because it's required for us to conduct business this way. And we will be in this building for a while until the new city hall is built. So we had to spend money and then ask the state to reimburse us from the monies the federal government gave them. In this case, $333,000. Had we not had to spend that money, we would have been well over the minimum reserve requirement by $80,000. So the effects of expenditure reimbursement didn't match up in the same period causes this situation to occur. So I just wanted to make sure that you recognize that. Good news is we did receive that reimbursement of $333,000 on October 6th. So it's not looking as dire as it did. And I can't go spend that again and ask for it back. We only get a fixed amount. But that's expenditures that we have been reimbursed for. Any questions I can answer? Always show you the utility and street funds report. Everything is looking good there, except on the regional water system where resources, i.e. revenue, is a little below projected, but it's only 3 months into the year, and it's pretty much at the end of the cycle where there might be big usage. It'll catch up over time, but I'm very comfortable where we are in the first quarter of this year at this time. And finally, we have the capital projects. We actually see some movement here. We have spent some money on the Ridgeway water line, and some work has been done on the 7th Street sewer replacement, getting started. Everything is looking good. As you are aware, we have, and I can't remember, what do we call the CIP page? I'm sorry?
Capital improvement plan?
But on the page, the website, on the car.
Hermiston project.
Hermiston project. I have received 2 compliments from colleagues around the country about our page that we show Hermiston projects, all of our CIP projects out in ad infinitum, and they say more cities should do that. So I wanted to point up to Mr. Morgan and Mr. Smith and the powers that be that are responsible for that CIP plan. That's a big plus for the city, that people see we're investing in the growth of the city and maintaining our systems. It helps me because that's where I go to find the information to put together the updates. I don't have to call Mr. Morgan or Mr. Roy in water or Mr. Ron in streets. I can look at that page and see the status because it's kept fairly current, I believe, by this young man running the camera, communicated to by Mr. Morgan. So again, kudos to the folks who keep that current because it is a good indication the city of Hermiston is moving. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any other questions you might have.
Any questions?
I do have a question. In the department,
department spending, I think you said that we saved up to 17%, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Is that also including city employees not receiving their raise until the beginning of the year? Is that included in that savings?
The cost of living adjustment has not been included in the first 6 months of this year. You will see that for 3 more months until the end of December, and then it will be kicked in at that time.
But yes, the savings were.
Yes, they were.
That 17%.
Absolutely.
I guess, moreover, shout out to the department heads, yes, shout out to our employees who have continued to not receive that, because we know that we're in this together. I know that it's very difficult, and I just want to let our city employees know that their hard work doesn't go unseen, and we're all in this together with this economic recovery. So kudos to all city employees for being able to take that as well.
Anything else from council? Okay, any motion to accept the September financial report as presented?
So moved. Second.
Right. Council Cooper moved and Council seconded. Any questions? Audience? Roll call?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0. Okay, committee reports. We have a public safety meeting. Council Kerman, would you bring us up to date?
Okay. So at the Public Safety Committee meeting today, Chief Edmondson brought us up to date on the third quarter crime reports, basically reporting that overall the crime reports are down, with one exception in that the arsons are up. That is due to, partially in part due to the inclusion of Lieutenant Studebaker covering arson cases through in an agreement with the Umatilla County Fire District Number 1. Also gave us an update on the transient activity and interaction with the different groups. Day shift having in August 26% of the calls were transient related. Night shift 22%. September 18%. Night shift 23%. October to date 15 so far, and 20% so far day shift and night shift respectively. He also made note that in dealing with reported crime or transients that were involved in criminal activity or involved in the investigation, that 6 had reported that they were here because they were expecting transient housing to come to Hermiston. They brought forward the Christmas Express. There's some concern, obviously, because with the schools not being in place, the CAN drive not being able to take place at the schools, but they're still working towards that. They've got a plan to assist with that and do some kind of tracking to help still give the kids that are able to participate in it some kind of credit. And celebration of those that are able to take care of it. And he made mention of the different officers that are involved in the school resources and the good work that they're doing. Officer Baez covering the elementary schools, Officer Nava, the mid-level, middle schools, and Officer Williams covering the high schools, part of the issues as they're taking place. They're also working towards covering their goals for next year. The goals as set forth this year are basically going to transfer over to next year. No reason to change a whole lot there. And in regards to Senate Bill 111 from 2007, he's working in conjunction with the local law enforcement agencies and the chiefs and the sheriff to update all of their interagency agreements in regards to the major crime teams, I didn't write that part down. Jason, you want to throw something in there?
Sure. The major crime teams, the mutual aid agreement, and then the Senate Bill 111 is the Umatilla County Diddley Physical Force Plan. All three of those will be brought back to the council sometime in November in the form of a resolution asking that I be able to update by signature those agreements. The last time the Diddley Physical Force Plan was signed by chiefs and the sheriff was 2008. The mutual aid was in 2013 and the major crime team was in 2012.
Thank you, Chief. And that's my report for that.
Appreciate that. Anything to add? All right.
Council President, I do have a question regarding the report. Is that accurate? There were 6 transients that said that they were here because of a temporary or emergency shelter or something of that sort?
All right. That was what was reported yesterday.
All right. Any other questions? Any other committee meeting?
No committee report from Hispanic Advisory Committee. We did not meet, but I'm hopeful that we can meet at least with a Zoom meeting or something this next coming month. I think it's really vital that we at least pass information in that committee. Also, Eastern Oregon Regional Recovery Council, I sent all the councilors an email prior to the council meeting, as well as City Manager Smith and Assistant City Manager Morgan. So just go ahead and take a look at that. A lot of what we've discussed so far has been around the economical impacts of COVID and how we're going to recover once this is all said and done. So we looked over a lot of economic forecasting over the last quarter, and we also discussed housing and homelessness as well. And so I encourage the councilors to take a look at that and look forward to discussing more information as we continue.
Any other committee reports?
Yeah, on last week, Mr. Morgan and I participated in the statewide transit investment fund meeting, and we forwarded 4 goals for the area, one of which was the Hermiston hopper being funded a little bit more through that particular funding stream. So the thought was just to get us more consistent, if the plan has been forwarded by the city.
Lily, I think we have a faith base coming up next
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yes.
Right.
November
Anything in recreation?
No, we are not meeting.
Public Infrastructure Committee meeting meets November 23rd.
Well, the mayor's not here to give a mayor's report. Any counselors? I just like to say, I'll let you talk about the award that they got at the LOC. But I'd just like to say say hats off to Dave and Roy as far as their presentations. They were well received. And I know Dave also sent us something that the city of Medford is working on as far as the homeless, which was kind of interesting. I'll go back and review it again. I watched most of it. It's kind of a different setup, so interested to learn more about it. Anyhow, the other thing is on Halloween coming up, now we're doing the trunk and treat, right? And that's from 4 to 6, if I'm correct, as far as we're making somebody community center. Any other councilors have? Yes, sir.
We got 8 days that we need to go to the polls and vote. You know, here in the state of Oregon, we vote by mail. And it's not small, voting for the city councils, or the county commissioners, or the state representatives, or senators. But this year we got a presidential, our country is divided, and we need to go to vote. And both our countries, what is the best for our country. Because after we vote, we need to come together.
Yes.
I just want to add to that, that the ballot box by City Hall is still available for use. And I think we're probably past a mail deadline at this point, although I'm not sure. When, is it tomorrow? Okay. So if you're not mailing by tomorrow or Wednesday, make sure to drop it off in the ballot box by City Hall.
Well said, yes. All right, manager's report. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm here. Echoing what Councilor Gutierrez and Councilor McCarty said, it's absolutely essential we go out to vote. So Wednesday is the deadline to mail it in, otherwise we have to go to City Hall. I kind of did have more of a question, and Kimberly's not here this time. Maybe it's towards the city. I was hoping Ms. Neville would still be here, but it's regarding the CARES disbursement and the money going to businesses. The other day I went to Rio Express on my very first to go. It's really close to Armin, so I could go there for lunch real quick. And I know they've been closed for a while, so I was like, oh, I'm going to just stop by, see how they're doing, and order something to eat. Then just so happened, I was like, hey, has anyone talked to you about disbursements or any types of funds or anything to assist businesses? And they were just no. No one's talked to them before. They said that they haven't received anything. I'm not sure if that's necessarily accurate in terms of maybe they received something in the mail. But it just got me thinking, if there could be something in the future, if this is something council could talk about. But we've talked about a lot of services over and over again, or outreach, trying to reach the Hispanic population, the Spanish-speaking population that we have here that's continuing to grow. If there would be some sort of liaison or somebody to be able to facilitate or to be able to get out the word, or at least more navigate, I would say, navigate a lot of the systems that a lot of them seem to either be confused about or not being able to receive, because we have very good intentions of trying to help out all these businesses, but unfortunately it seems like either they're not receiving something on our end, or they are, but they don't necessarily fully understand how to go ahead and execute something like this. So if they're, I guess I'm just tossing out something that I encountered, and maybe seeing if there could be a potential solution in the future. Maybe it's just going to talk to them, but maybe the city could consider having a spot, maybe like we discussed, having a PR person, or someone that could be able to get out the word on what's going on in Hermiston and all the projects that we're doing. Similarly, maybe a navigator, and maybe that's between the Chamber of Commerce of the city, maybe that's other entities working together, but I feel like we had discussions and tried to push getting all this information out, but I feel like there's a lot of either educating or navigation that also needs to take place. But I don't know, I guess I'm not really asking for a response, but I would like to see if there is a response or any thoughts or feedback either from council or city.
Well, you know, we made an effort to try to contact as many businesses as we could. We early in COVID made direct calls to hundreds of businesses with bilingual staff. And so, you know, I mean, maybe we could go door to door, but at some point we have to, you know, be able to balance our resources out there. And so, you know, I'm sorry that they didn't find out about it and they didn't have that opportunity, but at the same time, you know, we did make an effort to try to let everybody know that there was opportunities. And so, yeah, there's always ways that we can do better, and we can always look at what we might be able to do, maybe in a partnership type of a situation. I know the chamber does have a Hispanic business network, and you know, if that becomes more of a channel of communication and things like that, that could be a way for that to be successful. But you know, we're happy to work with whoever we can, but you know, I don't know how much more we could have done to try to get the word on some of those things.
Thank you, City Manager. I really appreciate your honest feedback regarding that. I guess I just, you know, I sat there and, you know, leaving the restaurant thinking that I know that there are multiple businesses that probably receive multiple grants, and that there were some that were apparently not shut out, but didn't get the grant, whether it's because of navigation or not being able to understand the information. And ultimately, it is unfortunate, but ultimately, they're also a business in our community that I wouldn't want to go under, or would want them to at least try to receive something. And so I think we need to, I know we work hard on it, but maybe innovate and try to do things differently, because it's been evident that it hasn't reached everybody. And so maybe finding a creative solution, maybe partnering with the business, the Latino Business Network. But we need to get something going. That was just a really disappointing conversation. And I know that our city did as much as we could, but I think this is kind of a point where we reflect on, okay, this is what we did. Obviously our efforts, I don't want to say fell short, but there is more to be done. And I guess maybe this is what I'm also doing as a school teacher. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to do things with my students, and maybe for some reason or another, they don't complete the assignment or they don't do it, and then I'm like, okay, well, what can I do again? Is there something I can do? And ultimately, you're right, it might fall on the business. Ultimately, they need to be putting in the legwork, but if there is something else that we can do, especially knowing that some of them have more barriers than others, I would like to see us do that.
We're willing to look at, and I think we were, you know, I wanted to defend city staff. I mean, I think we were very innovative to sit down. We had some staff that weren't doing things. We were able to call in a matter of 2 days all businesses that we could make contact with through our utility accounts, as well as through business listings with the chamber. So, you know, we're willing to continue to look and try to make other efforts. But, you know, at some point, we don't have the resources to do more. But we'll always be looking at ways that we can do better.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Manager, your report.
So it was mentioned, the LOC award, award for innovation, the project that Mr. K mentioned, hermistonprojects.com. So as a way to be transparent and help people see the projects that we're working on in the community, thought that was a great recognition of some of the efforts that we're making in Hermiston. Also wanted a couple of items from more of a staffing standpoint. Starting in November, we'll have a new city prosecutor That contract was out for bid, and a new respondent, his name is Kerry Mearby, and he'll be starting in November, so we're happy to have him on board. Wanted to let the council know, I'm sure many of you know Gina here in the Parks and Rec Department. She'll be retiring at the end of October. I think her last official day is November 2nd, so if you have a chance to come stop by and tell her thank you. She's done a great service for the city. We also wanted to kind of finalize the goal-setting date for next year. So Lou will be following up, but right now, from those that we've heard from, January 22nd, 23rd is the date that has been preferred so far. So if you can get Lily to respond to that, we can try to get Sarah on Sarah's calendar. She's always booking up earlier and earlier, so we don't want to miss out on that. It was mentioned the trick or treat here at the community center. It's going to be kind of a trunk or treat variation. It won't be even traditional in that way, so it'll be a drive-through. I know there's a number of businesses in downtown that are going to still participate and support that event, and they'll be here in the parking lot. There's a kind of a drive path through the parking lot. You can collect all your candy and just sit down all the time. So what a better way to celebrate Halloween. Then in this box here, I've got copies of the Parks and Rec plan. If anybody wants to have one to take home and fall asleep on. Yeah.
Is that the version being released to the public?
Yeah, it's available to the public as well. So if you want one, please come by and grab one on your way out. I also wanted to just give a quick update on the City Hall and the library project. The renovation's going well. If you go behind the library, you can start to see the back vestibule starting to take shape. They poured concrete, repouring most of the sidewalk. That'll be completed this week. And downstairs, they'll be starting to put drywall up. And so things are really starting to take shape. They really worked through a number of issues that always come up in remodels, right? There's things above the ceiling that nobody thought were going to be there, and circuits that should be powering something upstairs, we're doing something downstairs, and just kind of all those types of things. So I think we've sorted out most of those type of issues, and construction will move forward pretty well. City Hall itself, we're about 85% design, and are still on schedule, I think, to put it out to bid in the middle of November, with tentative schedule to request the council's approval of the contract in your first meeting in December. So that's what we're continuing to work on with the architects. That seems to be going well. And I think that's all the things I had to update you on. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council, any questions? Any answers? All right, I declare this meeting adjourned.
Did you anticipate having to talk?
Ready to go? Ready to go. All right.